Hi, this is Rob Hopkins here from Transition Network, and I'm delighted to have been asked to contribute something to World Localization Day. What a wonderful thing. I'm so delighted that something called World Localization Day exists. So I'm a great believer in economic localization, and I am here in my garden, which is one of my little efforts towards economic localization. You can see my food garden here growing in the late spring sunshine. So I was one of the people who started the transition movement, or transition towns as it's sometimes called, in 2005, 2006. There are now thousands of transition groups in 50 countries around the world, and their fundamental focus, one of their fundamental focuses is on localization. We like to think of the transition movement as being a movement of communities who are reimagining and rebuilding the world, and they do so with a particular focus on localization. And the transition movement has done loads, starting community energy projects, new food projects, new community farms, all sorts of different things like that. And one of the things that I'm involved in here in Totnes is a brewery that we started called the New Line Brewery, which is a localized brewery. It's a passion of ours. We just launched a beer made with wheat from fields just over there, and dandelions from just over there, and wild yeasts harvested from the air, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I love that localization brings that kind of diversity and delight into our lives, where we are able to come somewhere like here and taste something you can only taste here. You won't buy it in London, you won't buy it in Paris. You have to come here and taste it because it is of this place. And so the transition movement has done loads. It's been a real focus of my life for the last 12-15 years, has been around supporting communities who are building more localized, more resilient, more diverse, more wonderful economies. And one of the things that's been really interesting about COVID-19 and the lockdown has been that so many of the things that we kind of piloted and experimented with in the transition movement really now have become things that make complete sense across the mainstream. You know, we did a thing a few years ago called Can Totnes Feed Itself? Many other places did it. Norwich did it, for example, and mapping the food shed around the places where we live and saying, what's the capacity for this place to grow enough food to support us here? What would we need to do that? How would we need to work with land and farmers in a different way? If that work had been picked up and scaled up and properly resourced, we would have been approaching the issues around food security in the context of COVID-19 in a very, very different way. And so many of the different things that have been piloted during the localization, through the localization movement, really make so much sense now as we start to think about how do we build back better. We've always talked about resilience in the transition movement, and often resilience is talked about as the ability to bounce back after a shock. Well, in the transition movement we talk about the ability to bounce forward. How do we use something like COVID-19 as the platform, as the catalyst, as the springboard to bounce forward to something better, which is more appropriate for social justice, for equality, and for the climate emergency. And there's so much that could happen to support these networks. You know, one of the things that has happened during COVID-19 is that governments have looked at this incredible society-wide upsurging of love and mutual support, that we've all mostly gone along with the lockdown out of love and care for our fellows. We've seen the most incredible mutual support networks on streets, in towns, in neighbourhoods, people organising to feed each other. That whole kind of mutual support thing that has started is just extraordinary. That's the foundation for where we build the economy going forward from here. Too often governments just see community as something kind of irritating and pointless during times when everything's okay, and then when there's an emergency they say, oh, isn't it wonderful how people are supporting each other? No, those networks are the foundation for how we build back better after this, how we build forward to a world in which we can really thrive. And localization offers us a different economic story, which you can already see in practice in Preston, in Liège, in Rotterdam, in places where they are taking a different approach and saying what matters is the fundamental point of this economy is well-being and maximising the amount of times money circulates within this economy. That is the economic model for the 21st century, alongside donut economics. This is how we need to be thinking. So all I can say is, as somebody who has had the great privilege to go and visit lots of different places where this is happening, it works. This really works. And the beauty of putting limits, like saying we're going to work within this local area, is that the imagination thrives when you give it limits, as Dr. Seuss would tell you after he wrote his book with just 50 words. So the beauty of saying, okay, we're going to localize the economies. It unlocks a phenomenal amount of imagination, and you can see that already all around the world. So happy World Localization Day. Thank you to everybody who'd organized it. Thank you to everybody else who's presenting. Come and get involved. Come and get involved in Transition or all the other world localization movements, and let's make something extraordinary happen. Thank you.